Hi, my name is James Forman Jr. I teach at Yale Law School, and the seminar that I'm going to be teaching this summer, that I'm going to be leading, is called The Problem of Mass Incarceration. So many of you know by now, and I bet a lot of your students know, that the United States locks up more people than any other country in the world. We have 5% of the world's population and about 23% of the world's prisoners. And this is something that really started in the 1970s, it exploded in the 80s and 90s. And although incarceration rates have kind of leveled off in the last few years and declined in many states, it's still a massive human rights problem, it's a massive civil rights problem, it's a massive moral problem, and it's a problem that affects your students. Many of them, my guess, is every day. Many students likely have family members who are incarcerated. They may have friends who are incarcerated. They may be affected by aggressive policing tactics. They may be affected by things like the school-to-prison pipeline and disparities in suspensions and expulsions and other out-of-classroom placements. So this is an issue it's very topical, it's very pressing, it's very real right now. So what we're going to do in this seminar is we're going to use my book. I wrote a book about this called Locking Up Our Own: Crime and Punishment in Black America. And the book looks at this question through the lens of African American communities in particular, but we'll expand beyond that in the purposes of this seminar. But we'll use the book as a core text because the book has chapters about different aspects of this problem. So one of the chapters and one of the things that we're going to discuss in the seminar is gun control. Another chapter, another thing we're going to discuss is on the war on drugs. Another thing is mandatory minimum sentences. These are automatic sentences that apply. Anybody who is convicted of a crime has these sentences imposed upon them, and they've driven high levels of incarceration and high levels of racial disparity in the last few years or in the last few decades. And we're going to look at stop and frisk policing. So these are tactics where the police basically use really whatever pretext they can generate. Sometimes it's something really that happens, sometimes it's not, but they use these pretexts to try to get close to individuals, to stop them, to search them. And this is an area where young people in particular, students have been the most burdened. Kids that I worked with at the Maya Angelou School in Washington, D.C., a school for kids in the juvenile justice system, they had to deal with these stop and frisk tactics every day, and they were very demoralizing, they were very demeaning. So we're going to talk about how these tactics came to be, and we're also going to talk about the impact that they have on young people and on everybody today. So that's going to be some of the areas of focus, and that's describing the problem, the historical context in which this problem arose, and the impact that this problem has had throughout America, but especially on people of color and on poor and working class communities. And then the last part of the seminar, and it's not really going to be the last part in the sense of we're not going to get to it at the end, it's going to be woven throughout. For each one of these topics, we're not just going to discuss the topic, but we're also going to just talk about modern day reform efforts to try to change these practices. Because we're at a moment where for the first time in the last 50 years, more and more Americans, led by young people, are saying enough. Enough is enough, and we have to create a new and different kind of criminal system. And so the last part of the seminar, or the last part really of each of these little mini units, we're going to think about how can we help students to become advocates and become activists, to become leaders in their schools, in their lives, in their families, and in their communities, leaders for change. And how can we as educators take up that mantle as well? So I hope you'll consider joining me.